what inspired you to find the courage and the strength to take the action? Because I think about this all the time. I don't know if this question even makes sense, but where did this willingness come from? Because I know what you went through. I saw it, I know how hard it was for you to go back to school. I've experienced the same exact thing. I've often wondered for myself, what gave me the courage and the strength to be able to do that? Where do you think that came from for you?
I think that, it's such a hard question to answer. But I believe, and I feel like that it came from being so broken, from a point in being so broken, so lost, spiritually, mentally, physically, and then you find that hope and that faith. And I don't know, for me, when I first had that idea of hope, like something, this could be different, my life can change. That feeling is I think what started this motivation, this drive, this willingness to do whatever it took, and I told myself in that jail cell that if I get my second chance, I will do whatever it takes. I don't care, and I just, for me, like, especially early on, like, I had to be all in, I know me. And if I don't, even today, like, if I'm not all in and I kind of just like teeter in something, I don't finish it, that, and I know that. And so it's almost like, I don't want to play with that fire of letting go or letting up on the momentum that I'm making, because I don't know, part of me is afraid that it could be taken away if I do, and I know that if I keep pushing forward, I'm going to be making some headway.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Push Each Other to the Top podcast. Today's another special episode. We have a special guest with us, and I'll let Brent introduce him.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm glad to have Chaz with us today. I've known Chaz for a lot of years. I sponsored him for a little while, and I knew his story, and I was really excited to reach out to Chaz and have him, as a guest on the podcast, because I just think his story is really inspirational. He's gone through a lot of stuff, and I just want to start off saying that we're not affiliated with Alcoholics Anonymous at all, and I just want to make that clear. The stories that we share here are our personal stories, our personal stories of recovery. And again, I like to emphasize that the reason we're doing this is so we can give some people hope out there. We know a lot of people are out there struggling and going through a lot of difficult times, families and addicts and alcoholics. And, listening to Chaz and knowing his story and my story, I hope you get an opportunity to hear that you're not alone. And if we can do it, we hear this a lot, but if I can do it, you can do it, and it takes a community, and Chaz is a part of the community that I got sober, and he's been a big part of my recovery. So I just want to introduce Chaz and get him to kind of just lay out, how he got here, and, not dwell a lot on the past, but talk about his work in recovery and how he got to the place he's at today.
Thank you, Brent. Thanks for having me on and this opportunity to share a little bit about, my story, my journey. I can just start at the beginning. I born and raised in Utah. I have a twin sister, a little sister, an older brother, and we grew up in a very unstable environment. My mom was in and out of prison growing up. My dad was very abusive. an alcoholic, functioning alcoholic. And that was, but that was my normal. To me, when I was a kid, it didn't really seem odd, or I didn't really feel like I had less than anybody else. It was just kind of the way life was. And growing up with my mom constantly going in and out of prison, me and my sisters, we really had to rely on one another. We were all we had. Everywhere we got sent to, whether it was a family member's house or a grandparent's house, we had each other to rely on, and without them, I don't know how life would have turned out. But fast forward into my young teen years, I think that the abusive relationship that I had with my father, constantly falling short to his expectations, wishing that my mom was around or a little bit more present. I sought out friends that brought that connection into my world, and that connection and those friends had, alcohol and drugs involved. And I was, 15 when I started drinking and smoking weed. And at that time it was fun. But it brought a rebellion in me. It kind of gave me a little confidence, especially towards my dad. And when I finally stood up to him, it's like, well, what are you going to do? You hit me, they hit me again. I'm used to it now. And he kicked me out of his house. And I've been pretty much, I've never been alone doing it on my own, but that was the last time I could say that I actually had a home, because I just kind of surfed around where I could. I had a really good friend whose parents, they adored me, they loved me, and they brought me into their home. I dropped out of high school. They gave me my first job, and I just, kind of did whatever I wanted. I didn't go to school. I worked my butt off, and I partied every night, and all my money went to partying. I didn't have any responsibilities. I was still a teenager, and at this time, me and my sisters, we all got split up. My twin sister, she had her first child at 16 years old and was living with her boyfriend's parents. My little sister was still with my dad, and I was out on my own, and my mom was just getting out of prison and trying to restart her life. So there was a lot of, I don't know, a lot of uncertainty in that time, but what I could rely on was my friends, my social circle that I had, the party atmosphere, that's where I thrived. And that's all I did from the age of 16 to 18, just partied. And then I ended up getting a girl pregnant, with my first daughter. And right around that time, I was in this destructive mode of just wanting to get the most messed up, like whatever it was, whatever drug I could find, I wanted it, and if I heard of something that could get me even more high, I was going to get that next, and I eventually got a hold of some heroin, and my group of friends, they didn't really want to mess with it, but I kept pushing, kept talking about it. And finally, I was able to get some, and me and my group of friends were addicted to heroin 2 weeks later. And we used heroin for years after that,
How old were you? How old were you?
18.
18. Oh.
18. And Um, and my daughter's mom, she had no clue. She had no clue that I was addicted to heroin, and I hid it for about a year, and then I decided I'm going to clean up my act. So I went to a methadone clinic, which is for a lot of heroin addicts or opiate addicts, a methadone clinic is the first stepping stone into changing your life, and to getting well again. Um, and so when I took that step, I was so proud of that, and I told my daughter's mom that I'd been addicted to heroin for the past year. But don't worry, it's okay because I'm on methadone now. And she did not like that very much. She ended things with me because I hid that from her for so long, and I at the time I could not see why she had such a problem with it, because I made the changes that I thought I needed to make, and there was no reason for her to be upset. And now today I see, God works in mysterious ways, and everything happens for a reason. And I absolutely agree with her decision back then, but I used heroin for many years. It was my go-to drug, and I tried to kick it. I tried everything I possibly could for a long time until um, I reconnected with my youngest daughter's mom, who I was friends with in high school, and we ended up dating. And she she knew that I was battling with this heroin addiction, but I was kind of in and out of, you know, doing the methadone thing and still using. And um, by the time, and we were married for 2 years, and when she got pregnant, I told myself that I'm going to be off methadone by the time my daughter's born. And, but it was methadone is hard to get off of. And those guys, I don't know how they run today, but back then it was, they wanted you to stay forever. They did not care how long you stayed on methadone. And the milligram that I had worked up to was like 160 milligrams of methadone. And for the people that know, that is a lot. That is, you know, 5 milligrams to someone that's never done it could probably kill them. And but I started trying to figure out how I can get off this medication, and the only thing I could think of was, I'm going to put myself on blind detox. So I'm going to go in. I don't want to know what milligram I'm on. I don't want to know when you take me down. And I did that throughout those 9 months, and I got down to 1 milligram. And when my daughter was born, I said, "Okay, that's it. I'm getting off this 1 milligram." And I went through withdrawals for 3 weeks after that. And I wish I would have known then, like, what I was going through, but I was not right in the mind, spiritually, physically. And me and my ex-wife were fighting. I had a newborn baby crying all the time. And I remember I told her, I said, I don't feel safe holding our daughter right now, and even thinking about it makes me a little emotional. It's kind of sad, but, um, and she took that as she couldn't trust me, with my daughter. And I don't know, we danced the dance for 2 months after my daughter was born. And finally she gave me that ultimatum, and I had heard somebody, quote, like, "Don't give an ultimatum unless you're willing to accept the consequences." And I don't know why that stuck in my head in that moment, but that's what I said to her. And I walked out the door and I didn't look back. And that was the beginning of my spiral back down the heroin life, and I used for for a long time after that. I think it was 7 years I used, picked up a meth addiction in the process, and I just ran. I ran from my responsibilities as a father to my oldest daughter, and I ran from the responsibilities to my youngest daughter, and I finally reached a point where I told myself that I was doing them a favor by staying out of their lives and just continuing doing what I was doing, because I wasn't somebody worthy to be their father. And that's how the disease works. And to be honest, maybe I wasn't, and maybe me being in their lives regardless would have changed how things are today with them. But we'll never know. But I ran from all those things for a long time, and close to the end of my using career, I was a full-fledged heroin addict, a full-fledged meth addict, and I was shooting up meth, and I was dealing it. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a home. I was living out of my car, and every day was the survival of getting what I needed to stay well. And I think back about all the people that I dealt with back then, and all these so-called friends that I had, and how alone I felt. It's like all these friends just wanted their fix, just like I did, but I can't tell you how many nights and days that I spent alone in my car in the, middle of winter, and turning my car on, every other hour just to get warm, and, thinking back on it, I just feel so sorry for that version of me, or that part of me, but it's exactly what I needed, because, my sobriety day is December 26th of 2016. And, the days, weeks leading up to that day, I had a feeling, I felt like something was going to happen. I didn't know what. I'd never been to jail before. Prior to that, I've had some little run-ins with the law when I was a juvenile, but I'd never had been in trouble with the law. I had a good driving record. I didn't steal from people, but I had this feeling that I was going to go to jail for something. I didn't know what or why. My life was chaos. I was fighting with everybody that I knew. I was angry. I was, a victim to everything. And that day after Christmas, or the day of Christmas, I woke up in my car, and the girl I was dating had stolen all of my drugs and my money. And my car had been snowed in the avenues downtown. And I spent, a good couple hours digging my car out, wondering where the girl my girlfriend was. And I just remember being so pissed, and I was dope sick, and I just wanted to get to my mom's house, for Christmas. And lo and behold, my girlfriend walks out of this house that we were parked in front of, and she had no money. She had none of my drugs. But I was addicted to the toxic relationship that we had. So I said, well, let's just go to my mom's and spend Christmas over there. And we got to my mom's eventually, and I slept the entire day, and woke up on the 26th, and it was no longer a holiday, so I could re-up on what I needed. And that journey, that adventure led us to Utah County. And this was one of my girlfriend's connects that she that I did not like hanging around. I didn't like hanging out with people that were living a certain lifestyle, a gangster lifestyle. I just chose to not associate myself with them. And but I really needed to get better. I was pretty sick at this point, and we drove out there and we picked this guy up, and he said, "Hey, we need to stop at Walmart before we go anywhere." And I said, "All right." And so we go there. I'm curled up in a ball in my front seat. I have the shakes and feeling like I'm going to throw up. And next thing I know, he jumps in the car and he's like, "Go, go, 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 go." And I'm like, "What's going on?" And he's like, "I just robbed that lady." And so we get, I didn't even know what to think at the time. I just was like, "Let's just get out of here. I need to get well," and he told me that if I did a return for him, because he stole her credit card, got some gift cards, this whole game that, a lot of addicts do to make money, I would return this item for the cash. And if I did that, then he would, give me an extra $100. So I was like, all right, let's just get this over with. And I go in there and I just see all these, cop lights reflecting off the Lowe's windows. And I didn't really think much of it until I walked outside and my car was gone. And I'm like, what the heck's going on? And I walked through, there's probably like 50 cop cars out there. And I walked through the scene and still don't know what's going on. I'm calling a buddy. I'm like, "Hey, my girlfriend just stole my car. I don't know what's going on." And I walked back into the Lowe's. And at that point, I had probably 10 officers surround me, and they put me in handcuffs and took me to jail, and I remember feeling relieved in that cop car, and just feeling like I could breathe for the first time, and it's funny because that when I was in jail for that first week, I didn't know what was going on. It was over the holidays. We had New Year's coming up, and I kept thinking I was going to get out of jail. I knew countless people that went to jail and got out the next day. And I found out what my charges were, and I believe it was 12 felonies and 4 misdemeanors. And one of them was a felony 1 for aggravated robbery. And one of them was like a felony 2 for injuring a law enforcement officer. When that guy that did the robbery, he stole my car and hit a cop dog and went on a high-speed chase. And I got charged from everything that he did, from robbing that lady to the high-speed chase. I got charged with, because I was associated with him at that time. And I started thinking I wasn't going to get out of there, and I weighed 120 pounds when I was first in jail. I was sicker than a dog. I couldn't eat anything for 3 weeks, throwing up and, out of every orifice I had. And they put me in max security for 2 months. And there was a lot of time to think, and that first month that I was in there, all I could think about was getting out and getting high. All I could think about was the ways that I was going to make money, the ways that I was, who I was going to call first and what I was going to do. And then I don't know, I don't know what it was. If it was the letter I got from my sister, the letter I got from my mom, or the Bible that I picked up, and started reading. But something changed. And I finally, I don't know, it's almost like time unfroze in there for me. I was like, holy shit, what have I been doing with my life for the past 7 years? Like I have kids. They don't know where I'm at. I don't know where they're at. And they deserve more, and I can do more. But I didn't really know what that looked like. I just knew that I really wanted a change. I did not want to go back to that life that I was living. And by the grace of God, my mom was able to get me an attorney that was willing to do my case pro bono, and he fought tooth and nail to get me into a treatment center. And the judge did not he wanted to send me to prison because everyone else went to prison that I was with. And luckily the DA and my attorney, they kind of were on the same page, which usually doesn't happen. But they were able to convince the judge to release me on the contingent that I went to a treatment center, that I had clean UAs, and I paid these fines. And I knew that was my chance. I knew that was my second chance. When I was in there, I saw these guys coming in and out in the 60 days that I was in max security. And I just was like, where's my second chance? These guys are just pissing it away. And if you give me that second chance, I won't let you down. And it was Valentine's Day of 2017 that I got released. And, I was on house arrest for 2 months after that. And my journey started with the treatment center. I couldn't get into one right away because I didn't have insurance. So I was on a waiting list, and I went to this like weekly group therapy thing through the state until a spot opened up at the treatment center that I was supposed to go to. And I did that for 9 months, and it was a 9-month treatment program. And I was introduced to the program through a friend that I used to deal to. I saw him on Facebook, and I didn't even really recognize him when I saw him. I was just like, what the heck? He's looking good. He did not look like that when I saw him last. And then I reached out to him and I asked him, what was he doing? Because I needed to change my ways too. And whatever he was doing was working, and he asked me for my address, and he showed up to my house with an Alcoholics Anonymous big book. And, I'll never forget it, because it's literally the thing that changed the course of my life, and we fed on each other. He was working his program, and I was still figuring things out, and but he helped me a ton. He helped me in the beginning of my journey of sobriety, and so I kind of hung out with him for while I was in treatment, and but I didn't want to do anything program wise. I was introduced to the program, but I didn't want to do that because I was still in treatment, and that was my main focus. And I remember, when I was in treatment, and this counselor said, well, what are you going to do once you get out of here? What's your plan? And I said, well, I'm going to work the program outside of treatment. And she just couldn't understand why I would ever want to do that. Why do you want to classify yourself as an alcoholic for the rest of your life? And I said, well, the way I see it, that's how I'm going to maintain my long-term sobriety. I'm not going to go to the grocery store and say, hi, my name is Chaz, and I'm an alcoholic. That's not what you do. But something about the program just spoke to my soul and my heart. I knew that it was the thing that was going to work for me, because I've tried everything else. I've literally tried everything to stay sober, and nothing stuck. I always ended up in the same place, around the same people, and the end result was worse than the last one. And I was done playing that game. And so when I, finished my treatment, I had the sponsor that had gotten me through the majority of the steps. But I moved from my sister's house, and that's the other thing too, is then I want to mention is that my little sister, who, through my using career, we weren't close, we barely even talked. She was sick of seeing me killing myself. And she was the one that picked me up from jail. And she just said, you can come live with me, and the only thing that you need to worry about is getting better. And, and I didn't have to worry about paying rent, and I didn't have to worry about food. And, if it wasn't for her, I would have never made that first step into even thinking about, I would have went right back to the group of people I was hanging around, because that's what was comfortable for me, and that's what I knew. But she gave me the opportunity again, like the judge that I was looking for, that I needed. And, but I moved out of her house after I finished treatment. And, I thought it's crazy looking back. It's like, I thought I had it all figured out, because I was out of treatment. I was off probation. I was looking good. I was feeling good. And I finally, got this job with someone that lived in Bountiful, and I moved out to Bountiful. And I think for me, like, the treatment was great. The little bit of program that I worked in Salt Lake was great, but it really didn't begin until I moved to Bountiful. The community out there is just way different, and it felt like home to me. And I never thought I'd live in Bountiful. I always thought that's where like the stuck up people lived. And so, to find myself out there and to feel the way that I did, it was something that I latched onto and I didn't let go of, and I met amazing people early in my, I had 1 year of sobriety when I moved to Bountiful, and I met amazing people right off the bat, and became very involved in the community in Bountiful, the recovery community. And, and Brent was my sponsor early on. And I remember I asked him to be my sponsor because my very first meeting that I ever went to in Bountiful, and I'm not a shy guy, but I definitely don't talk to people right off the bat. I keep my mouth closed and I just listen. And I was hoping to just go in that meeting and just, observe. And he turns around and he's like, I've never seen you before. How about you share? And my stomach just dropped, and I'm like, this asshole, and, but he pushed me out of my comfort zone, and that's why I asked him to be my sponsor. Because I knew that he was going to do that going forward. And, and we did the deal. We worked the steps, and it's just wild back then because everything seemed so hard and out of reach, I remember when my roommate that I was living with, he relapsed and went to jail, and it was like, the world was ending for me, and I remember, Brent took me for a little drive to talk to me about it. And by the end of our drive, I had a few suggestions to follow, and I'd be damned that a few days later I was feeling right again, and that's the kind of, fellowship and community that we had out there. And if it wasn't Brent, it was going to be someone else that's willing to be there for you. And I remember Brent telling me, like, hey, what's your 5-year plan? And I remember this day, like, I was at the park getting ready to play softball, and I just told my girlfriend at the time, that's now my wife, I said, what? My 5-year plan? I don't even have my driver's license. What do you mean my 5-year plan? you know, and and I'm super glad that I didn't come up with that 5-year plan, because I would have sold myself short 110%. Because I don't know, I never done anything with my life. I didn't know what it was like to do things, to do adult things, to have goals and to reach those goals. I had no freaking clue. But it did spark a little something. And I finally got my driver's license back, and I finally decided to go get my GED. And and I didn't even study for it. I just was like, I'm just going to go for it and try it, and I took each phase of the GED test one at a time, because I didn't want to be overwhelmed. And I ended up getting my GED, and I slowly started seeing this, like, this possibility that I could do hard things. And even if I couldn't, it was going to be okay, and so my first few years in recovery, it was all about, like, figuring out who Chaz was, and realizing that I wasn't this, junky piece of crap that I thought that I was. I wasn't this deadbeat dad. I wasn't, unemployable. I was the exact opposite, is what I was finding. And it was through the program that taught me, that showed me that, and then taught me how I can build on top of that, and just the longer I'm in sobriety, the less I have it figured out. But the more grace I learn to give myself, when life on life's terms happen. But I reached that 5-year mark, and I finally found myself wanting more, because I was 32 at the time, and didn't have a career. I had my GED, which was great, and I had my driver's license back, which was great. And, my kids were slowly coming back into my life. And, but I needed to start making some moves to start rebuilding, a future for myself. And I started thinking of, like, being a cop, because I really like helping people. I like being a part of something bigger. And my wife, she met her biological mom for the first time, and her husband is a firefighter, and he said, why don't you come do a ride along? And so I did a couple ride-alongs, and I just decided, you know what, I'm going to go for it. And little did I know at the time that there was so much that went into becoming a firefighter. I thought they would just hire me and train me on the job, and it was a 3-year journey that I didn't realize I was taking. And I was challenged left and right through the entire thing. I had my GED. I hadn't been in a classroom and since I was 16, and I had to learn how to learn, and it was hard, and I was around a bunch of younger people that were freshly out of school, or they were sharp, or, they didn't live the life that I lived when they had the opportunities to learn. And so I did struggle quite a bit with my, self-doubt. I kept thinking, if, am I even capable of doing this? And am I someone that is worthy of doing this? And, but the program taught me to take it one day at a time. And it also taught me that all I got to do is show up and do the next right thing. And however it works out is how it's going to work out. And I can't sit there and try and control it, and the more I let go of the idea of what I wanted it to be or how it was going to be, the more things fell into place. And I ended up, getting hired on with the fire department after some classes and some fire academies, and and I heard and in the mix of all that, I also ended up getting married, and to my girlfriend now, to my wife, that I met. I had a year sober, and she had a couple months or something like that when I met her, and and we both were in love with being in recovery and being sober, and we shared the same goals and the same perspective, and and it worked out. That's not saying, I didn't make any mistakes, before we got married, but, she's a big part of my journey, in the last, 6 years. And, and this is all things that wouldn't have been possible if I decided to go back and hang out with those people that I was fantasizing about hanging out with when I was in that jail cell. I think one of the greatest gifts that I've gotten in this whole journey is the realization that, why not me? Like, why not me? Why am I not worthy of living in recovery, living a sober life, living a normal life? Why can't I be forgiven by the people that I've made, harmed? And why can't I make up the things that I've done? And that, that perspective and attitude is, it's got me pretty far. I feel like everyone is given the same chances, and that's what makes it so frustrating when we see people in recovery struggle. Because why not them? And I don't know. I wish I had that answer for some people, but for me, I think, why not me? Why aren't I not capable of living a life that's worth living? And why can I not have my kids back in my life? And the only thing that I can come up with is because I'm getting in the way, So, and that's, that's my story in a nutshell. I still, I have 8 years today. I'm very involved in the recovery community. I've, started a couple of meetings myself, and I, live this thing every day to the best of my ability,
That's so cool. Chaz, it's an amazing story. I'm hearing a lot of my dad and a lot of the same attitudes. Where do you think that came from? Where you had that aha moment or whatever it was that it can be me? Why not me? Like, where did that come from? Was it the big book? Was it just, I'm curious if you ever thought about that. Like, where did it evolve from?
Honestly, I think it came from just the willingness to believe, I guess. Like, the program is really built around a higher power, a God, forgiveness. And for me, and I don't know, like I didn't even know anything about the program when I first got sober and when I first started feeling like, why not me? But I think that before I even stepped foot out of that jail cell, I had already started formulating a spiritual connection with my higher power, and I think that I wish I had the answer so everybody could find it, I think for me, I had enough life happen and enough loss and enough pain and enough disappointment that I had nowhere else to look or to turn, and I knew that I had to forgive myself first if I was going to be able to do anything to make it right, and the book tells us that some people may not forgive us for the harms that we've done, but we always need to be willing and ready to make it right when we can. And if we try to make it right and they don't accept it, that's not up to me. I'm not the one that's in charge of that,
Mm.
But
one of the questions I have, Chaz, is, I loved your story. I like, the one thing that I've always wondered about is what gave you the drive? I mean, this is a program of action. We talk about that all the time. And, I've seen you and I know your story pretty well. I got to experience a lot of it. And you've always had this willingness to go out there and, do whatever it takes, not only to stay sober, but to better your life. We just heard how much you've gone through to get to where you're at. What inspired you to find the courage and the strength to take the action? Because I think about this all the time. I don't know if this question even makes sense, but where does this willingness come from? Because I know what you went through. I saw it. I know how hard it was for you to go back to school. I've experienced the same exact thing. I've often wondered for myself, what gave me the courage and the strength to be able to do that? Where do you think that came from for you?
I think that it's such a hard question to answer. But I believe and I feel like that it came from being so broken, from a point of being so broken, so lost spiritually, mentally, physically, and then you find that hope and that faith. And I don't know, for me, when I first had that idea of hope, like something, this could be different, my life can change. That feeling is I think what started this motivation, this drive, this willingness to do whatever it took, and I told myself in that jail cell that if I get my second chance, I will do whatever it takes. I don't care, and and I just, for me, like, especially early on, like, I had to be all in, I know me. And if I don't, even today, like if I'm not all in and I kind of just like teeter in something, I don't finish it, that, and I know that. And so it's almost like, I don't want to play with that fire of letting go or letting up on the momentum that I'm making, because I don't know, part of me is afraid that it could be taken away if I do, and I know that if I keep pushing forward, I'm going to be making some headway, I guess. I don't know. That's kind of a tough question to answer, honestly.
I think, we hear in the meetings a lot, we hear people, the gift of desperation. And that's
Mhm.
what I hear a lot of what you're saying. And I felt the same thing. You know, you just get you like you said, you were so broken. I felt exactly the same way. I just think it's so important that people out there understand that, you know, anybody can do this. You know, Chaz and I are not something super special. You know, I think we both got to a place where we had no other way but up. Uh, and I loved how you talked about, you know, if you got a second chance. I felt exactly the same way. It's like I had I just needed an opportunity. I think it's so important that we recognize these opportunities when they do come our way, and that
Mhm.
we don't push them away, and we take that risk. Because once you, like your GED, how important was that when you finished that test and became, you know, you had a GED? I mean, it just gives you the encouragement to think to yourself, oh my gosh, yeah, I can accomplish this stuff if I just walk through that fear
Yep.
and I show
Yep.
up. You know, I
Yeah, I
think,
remember when I was sitting in the Chiefs interview to get my job with the fire department that I work for. I had just ruptured my disc in L5S1, and but I didn't tell anybody. I was kind of keeping it on the down low because I really wanted this job. And the chief, he looks at me, he's like, I just want to let you know that a lot of people don't make it through this academy. And I said, well, is it because it's, physically hard? He said, well, yeah, it's physically hard, but it's the literature that they teach, the way that they do it, a lot of people can't get through it. And I remember looking at him and I said, well, what I'm hearing is that it's possible. And
yeah,
and that was the attitude that I had in camp. And even in camp with my back injury, um, one of my captains, he took me aside and he said, hey, I don't really think that the fire service is for you. Like, you have a back injury. And I woke up the next day and I could barely walk, and I just broke down in tears to my wife and I said, they're going to fire me today. Like, I can't even like walk more than 10 feet, and so, but I prayed, and I just did the next right thing, and I showed up. And by the time I got to work, the pain had relieved a little bit, and they sat down and had another conversation with me. And I told my captain, I said, there is no other option for me. Like, I have put so much sweat and tears into this that I will continue showing up, and I will continue doing my absolute best until you tell me to go home. And he said, that's exactly what I wanted to hear, and I won't bring it up again.
nice, nice.
Well, I
Yeah.
gotta say, I know you guys don't think you're special, but I'm telling you, this is not every day I meet people like this.
Yeah, we're definitely blessed, that's for sure. And
100%.
like Brent said, for people that are listening to this that are maybe new or brand new or struggling in and out, if I can do it, anyone can do it, and I hope that, it may not be in this podcast or any of the podcasts, but I hope that you find the theme that brings that willingness into your heart, into your mind, because it is, you can't even dream of the life that you would live if you can stay sober.
Yeah, yeah. You know, one thing that really stood out when you were sharing your story is when you got out of jail, there was a guy that was in the program that you had known previously, and and he stuck his hand out to you, and
Mm-hmm.
he pushed you to the top. And that's what this whole podcast is about. You know, there's one thing I think we all have in common in the program is we help each other. We push each other to the top. We
Absolutely.
always got a hand out, and always want to give people a whatever they need to stay sober. And so if you're out there struggling and you're listening to this podcast and you think that, oh, you can't do something, just stick your hand out. Just give us a chance to talk to you or do whatever, because that's what we're here for. That's what this whole podcast is about, is try to help people. And I just, like I said earlier, is I just love Chaz's story. I think that it's inspiring. I got to, he gave you the quick version. I got to watch a lot of this. I got to see him when he walked in the doors of Bountiful, and I've seen what he's accomplished and the things that he's gone through, with back problems and work and school. And I remember having conversations with Chaz about his kids, long, long, long conversations about his kids and how important they were to get back in his life. And I'll tell you what, I got a lot of joy out of seeing you with your daughters for the first times, man. I just had a huge smile on my face.
Yeah.
Everything's possible, dude. Everything's possible if you just take the journey that we're talking about. Take that chance. Just stick your hand out and ask for help, because we're here to help you.
Yep. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me and letting me share a little bit about my story. It's, like you said, just stick your hand out.
Yeah.
Because someone will be there to grab it.
Yeah. Yeah, I like Jonathan being a part of this, because he's got a whole different perspective. He looks at you and I and think, "Holy heck, what happened?" How did they ever survive?
Yeah.
No, it's so inspiring. Like man, it's emotional in lots of ways. I'm so proud of my dad being able to turn around and say, "Hey, you're new. Why don't you share?" I love that.
Yep.
That I can hear his catchphrases coming from you, and that love and that hope is being passed around. That is so, man, it's so cool. And I'm just in awe. I really am. It's a miracle. It's God's hand in your lives, and I just know it. And so I appreciate you sharing. I know it's hard stuff sometimes to talk about. It's hard for me to even imagine, but I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you sharing. I hope this touches someone out there, and they can have that same hope for themselves, that they are special, that they can have a great and fantastic life. I hope that's what happens.
The recovery community is really quite amazing. I just can't even describe the love and the care that we feel for each other, and the lengths we'll go to help one another is pretty incredible. Chaz and I know so many people. I mean, if either one of us were in trouble, we could make, I don't know how many phone calls, and there would be people there in a heartbeat. Even in Thailand, where I'm at right now, people come running. Well, maybe they wouldn't come running, but certainly want to help me. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's a lot different than the circle I used to be around. It's a pretty incredible experience, and that's really what it's all about. And I think that is why I'm so willing to be that guy that grabs the hand, because I feel responsible and I feel like I have a debt to pay. Because it was so freely given to me when I needed it, and my life is just incredible to what it was. So I'm grateful for it.
We're lucky, Chaz. We are lucky. We are sober today.
Yes, we are.
Well, I love that. I think we'll wrap it up right there. Thanks again, Chaz, for sharing. Super appreciate it. Thank you for your time tonight, and everyone out there in podcast land. This is for you. This is why we do this, is to see if we can help others and give them some hope.
I just wanted to also mention that we're going to be coming up with some episodes that we're going to talk a lot about the family. And I think that's going to be really exciting. We're going to kind of take it in a little different direction for a while and talk about family experiences. I'm going to have all at least 4 of my kids on the next episode, which ought to be, well, I don't know. Some of them need to be wearing a shock collar so I can keep them under control. But it's going to be a lot of fun. But the whole idea is just to, just like Chaz and I, we get our families back together, or we learn how to be a part of a family, which is so vitally important. So
Yeah.
we talk about that.
I love that. That's a great teaser. So yeah, listening. The next one will be super fun. Yeah. This is awesome. All right. Well, have a great night. And
You too. Thank you. Have a good day, Brent.
Yeah. Thank you, Chaz. Appreciate it, man.
right.
See you guys.
Thanks for listening to Push Each Other to the Top. Brent's story is a reminder that even in our darkest moments, there's still a path forward and someone willing to walk it with us. If this episode meant something to you, share it. And if you're struggling right now, please know you're not alone. Follow the show wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss the next story. And if you can, leave a quick review. It helps more people find these conversations. New episodes drop soon. We hope you'll come back. Continue listening for behind the scenes moment after we ended the episode. Oh, wow. Dude,
Is that good?
that was so good.
Yeah.
I was tearing up.
Yeah. I thought he did a really, really good job. I knew he would. I mean, his story is just amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
living in his car to being a firefighter now, and
So cool.
he worked his butt off to become a firefighter. He had back surgery and all that stuff, and he just did not give up, man.
So crazy. Man, that's awesome. I love that. It reminded me a little bit. I mean, it's nothing to the extreme of that, but I remember moving my family to Logan, had 3 kids, and my first semester, I just couldn't get it. And the professor wasn't giving me anything. And I'm just so mad and upset. I just want to quit. And I remember I was standing in the line waiting to talk to him and kind of complain to him, And this person in front of me was getting some feedback from him. And he said to her, well, maybe this just isn't for you. Maybe this isn't the career that you should go into. And it just hit me like, oh my gosh, he's trying to weed people out. He's trying to weed people out. And freaking, I moved up here. I'm going to get my degree. I don't care. I'm going to do anything. I'm just willing to just do it. And it changed everything, for me. That decision of like, I'm all in. I'm going to do it.
See, that's what I'm talking about. Where does that come from? Is it just who we are? Is our personality? I mean, that's like Chaz. I mean, he had every reason in the world to give up. So many people do that. They get to that point and they just throw in the towel and they die, And you get to that point where you're up against the wall, and what in your mind or your soul, your heart just gives you the courage to take that next step. I think that's a huge key to our success, to everybody's success, really.
I think so. Yeah. Because we all hit hard times, right? But especially for an alcoholic, an addict, that's even more. I can't even imagine. I don't know what that's like, right? Like, so yeah, I don't know, man. There's something there. And I heard once, I can't remember, it was like another show, and they were talking about there's some kind of gene or there's something in an alcoholic's mind and personality that when something bad happens, they run towards it. Right? Where a lot of people will be like, no, I'm going to go find some safety over here, But the alcoholic mind is kind of like, I'm going to. And so there's something interesting. I don't know if that's true or not, but I remember this conversation and I thought that's really interesting. These people, there really is something special about their makeup. And
I think we're so used to chaos. I always talk about this, our chaos. We're so comfortable in chaos. And when things, it's just like one time I called Horace and I said, Horace, I don't know what's going on. I am super uncomfortable. There's nothing going on. Wife's good, job's good, kids are good, nothing's going on. And I am just going crazy. And
Mm.
he said, Brent, have you been saying a serenity prayer? And I says, yes, I have. And he goes, it's called serenity. And he hung up.
Yeah.
And he hung up. It's like, what?
Thanks.
We're just so used to chaos. When things get quiet, it's super uncomfortable for alcoholics.
Oh,
It's
interesting.
just like, wow, there's no noise. The police aren't chasing me. All these things are not happening. And it's super uncomfortable. So that's a little bit of what you're talking about.
So that's exactly right. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, that's part of the evolution, the whatever, the genes that get passed down from generation to generation. And here we are ready. You're ready to do battle. And the battle
Yep.
is not, it's more spiritual, more emotional, more, you know, that kind of battle.
Yeah, when he was sharing, I was just like, wow, where does that, is that a spiritual thing that drives us to do that or to walk through those fears and gives us the courage to do that? I think it must be. I don't know. Is it a physical thing, like you say? Is that part of our DNA? Is it part of our makeup? But I don't know.
It's there.
So many people have it, and then there's so many people that's the sad part. You just hear so many people that just throw in the towel and give up. And you can see why, because it's none of this stuff is simple to do. It's scary to look at yourself. It's scary to push yourself to the limit. What's your limit?
Yeah.
I remember one time I got interviewed. It was workforce services or something like that. It was about a job, about a career. They wanted to do an evaluation to see what I would be good at, right? And they asked me some questions, and the guy's like, "Well, what do you want to be? What is your I mean, who do you want to be?" I was really young when I did this, and it was like I remember thinking, God, I don't know because I don't know what my limits are.
Mm.
I couldn't read or write. Well, what if I could read and write? What if I could learn? What if I didn't have a learning disability? Would I want to be a doctor, a lawyer? I mean, what really, I was so I lived in such a narrow little box that I just couldn't that question just drove me crazy. It's like, I don't know. I want to be the best I could be. And, you know, here we are years later, and you take that step of going back to school and doing all these things you never thought you could do. It gives you the encouragement to, the sky's the limit, man. Addicts and alcoholics can achieve anything if they put their mind to it. We're so bullheaded and stubborn. We just,
Yeah. I think
I just
that's
think that
that's not a
sky,
bug. That's a feature.
yeah.
That's what we say. That's not a mistake. That's the built-in feature that's supposed to happen, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and in both yours and his, there's a lot of similarities.
Oh, yeah. A lot of similarities.
Really interesting. And part of it, I think, was those small little wins, right? Those small
Yeah.
breakthroughs of a fear. Never been to jail, but had this sense that he might be going to jail.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
it happens, and these little small things, a guy that reaches out to him and helps him out and helps him break through another fear, and that sort of builds on itself, it seems like. And in your story, the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can just see him in jail. He's there for a month, and it changes his whole attitude, his whole mind. And he picked up a Bible, and he and then all of a sudden he has a spiritual experience, and then he starts looking for the second chance.
Right.
That drive. That's a lot like my story. You have that spiritual experience, and then you ask for that second chance. I chose to live that night. That was my second chance. So there are a lot of similarities, and I've talked to a lot of people in recovery, and they have similar experiences to that. that they get to that place where they're so desperate for their lives to change, you know. And
Yep, and
I,
Chaz,
I just I just loved listening to that and really paying attention to those similarities and to be able to pay attention to his uh his path, man. It's
yeah.
fabulous.
Well, and it just makes me so proud of the work you've done. Makes so proud of you. Like
Well,
that's so cool. I just can't. I just like wow. You know. I mean, Chaz,
you know,
he did the hard stuff.
it's really great to hear you say that because you know I share my story a lot, and we're in the program. I'm nothing special in the program. I mean, I go to the I'm nothing special.
Sure.
And Michael the other day had listened to the podcast, and he said what you just said, and it's just like, wow, I have accomplished something. It's so nice to hear that you guys are proud of me because that means more to me than anything. It's just a, and I remember when we started to doing this podcast, we said, if nothing else, it's for our family. And you know what? That's where I'm getting all the joy from is from you guys,
Yeah.
You get to listen to my story and my thoughts, and you get to know me at a level that I just think that is so important that you know who your dad is to the level of doing this. I mean, I just think it opens up a door that you don't always get to open up and have conversations about anything
Right.
and what our thoughts are and stuff. So it's really taken and I knew it would. I knew it'd take a life of itself. I didn't know where this path was going when we started, but I had this feeling, man, this is going to be one heck of a path.
Yeah.
And I'm a little afraid of the next episode, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. I don't know what's gonna happen. I'm just like,
We need an hour to get all the kids to
Yeah,
settle
for sure.
down before we start.
yeah, and then there's gonna be another hour or so of conversation, and like, yeah, I can only imagine. It's just gonna be a riot.
I can't even imagine where this is going to go. I'm hoping that I can kind of control things a little bit, but I don't have a lot of hope to be able to do that even,
Yeah, I don't know.
It's going to be interesting.
Go with the
I-
flow, right? Just don't
think-
fight the river. I guess just
Yeah. That's, I mean, it's gonna be what it's gonna be. Like, we don't have to put it on the podcast.
yeah. No, we can just I can save that one away.
We can just store it away somewhere.
It'll be for our own amusement someday.
Yeah.
One time that we tried to do a podcast with everybody.
Right. Here's when we tried to all get together and do a podcast.
Didn't work out so well, but
No. I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be powerful. I think it's going to be very interesting. I'm really looking forward to. I think when I was talking to Michael, I think Michael had some really good thoughts and ideas about doing more stuff, and we've talked about it too with the family. I just think that there's some real opportunity to touch people's lives out there and to help people. I really think that we're getting an audience now. I mean, I'm getting the strangest comments from people that I had. They're not even alcoholic, or
yeah.
they're just acquaintances that I've known in business, and they've listened to it, and they send me text messages and stuff and just say, oh my gosh, I can't wait for that. I had one tell me the other day, I can't wait for the next episode. I was like, wow,
I know, that's crazy.